All right, looks like we've trickled down our numbers. I've got 1:03 Central Time. So before we kick off into some introductions, I want to start us off with a short video that I think will set the stage for this month's webinar. And once we get that moving, we'll jump right into, I think everybody's here to talk about today.
Good. How do I deal with setbacks, failures, delays, defeats, or other disasters? I actually have a fairly simple way of dealing with these situations, summed up in one word: good. This is something that one of my direct subordinates, one of the guys who worked for me, a guy who became one of my best friends, pointed out. He'd pull me aside with some major problem or some issue that was going on, and he'd say, "Boss, we got this thing, this situation, and it's going terribly wrong." I would look at him and I'd say, "Good." And finally, one day he was telling me about something that was going off the rails, and as soon as he finished explaining it to me, he said, "I already know what you're going to say." And I asked, "What am I going to say?" And he said, "You're going to say good." He continued, "That's what you always say. When something is wrong or going bad, you just look at me and say, good." And I say, "Well, I mean it, because that is how I operate." So I explained to him that when things are going bad, there's going to be some good that will come from it. Oh, mission got canceled? Good. We can focus on another one. Didn't get the new high-speed gear we wanted? Good. We can keep it simple. Didn't get promoted? Good. More time to get better. Didn't get funded? Good. We own more of the company. Didn't get the job you wanted? Good. Go out, gain more experience, build a better resume. Got injured? Good. Needed a break from training. Got tapped out? Good. It's better to tap out in training than to tap out on the street. Got beat? Good. We learned. Unexpected problems? Good. We have an opportunity to figure out a solution. That's it. When things are going bad, don't get all bummed out, don't get startled, don't get frustrated. No. Just look at the issue and say, good. Now, I don't mean to say something trite. I'm not trying to sound like Mr. Smiley Positive Guy. That guy ignores the hard truth. That guy thinks a positive attitude will solve problems. It won't. But neither will dwelling on the problem. No, accept reality, but focus on the solution. Take that issue, take that setback, take that problem and turn it into something good. Go forward. And if you are part of a team, that attitude will spread throughout. Finally, if you can say the word good, then guess what? It means you're still alive. It means you're still breathing. And if you're still breathing, that means you've still got some fight left in you. So get up, dust off, reload, recalibrate, re-engage, and go out on the attack.
Well, if that's not a way to start up a conversation, I'm not sure how we start a leadership conversation off with anything other than listening to Jocko Willock. I'm not sure how many of you on the webinar today have had an opportunity to listen to, follow, or read Jocko Willock. But for those not familiar, Jocko Willock is a retired Navy SEAL lieutenant commander with the U.S. Navy SEALs, and is just an incredible motivator as it relates to leadership. And I've had the opportunity to listen to Jocko on several occasions in my public safety career. And I think what he really speaks to is something as leaders we should be doing with our team members, and that really is setting them up for success, but challenging them to do better. And we'll talk a little bit about that here today. But I thought that was just an interesting way to start off, kind of get us motivated, start thinking about the challenges that we face as leaders, and as we're trying to aspire to continue to grow in our organizations, but more importantly, inspire those around us to continue to do good things. So again, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are here in today's webinar. My name is Robert Murphy, and I am the Director of Business Development here at Datamark. And today, I'm actually joining everybody from sunny, at the moment, sunny Dallas, Texas, as I'm in town to meet with our NISGIC contingent from the National State Geographic Information Council. But, you know, I will say that following an introduction to Jocko Willock is going to be difficult. He's just an extremely passionate leader and motivator. But what I want to do is step you through some of my experiences in my time in public service and what I've learned about some leadership capabilities. There on the screen, you should be able to see kind of my background, 23 years in public safety. I spent about 7 years as a fire and EMS instructor in the state of Pennsylvania, and then also served as a non-communications chief in Florida. I am a member of NENA and EMP, and then also completed the APCO Registered Public Safety Leadership Program, which quite honestly was one of the best training programs that I've taken from a public safety communications perspective in quite some time. So if you get an opportunity, there are a couple courses around leadership in public safety specifically that I highly recommend. The APCO RPL is certainly one of those. And then also from our friends at NENA, their CMCP course talks about organizational leadership. So again, I highly recommend anybody take some time to step in through that. So let's jump into kind of today's agenda. I will do my best to monitor the chat along the way. I would highly encourage folks, if you have some questions, some feedback, you throw it in the chat, throw it in the QA. Stephanie's on with us this afternoon as well. So if I miss something, she can stop me and pull me back to that. But, you know, leadership conversations really take on all shapes and sizes. And there's, as we'll see it here in a little bit, there's a 1,000 ways to lead your team. And I think what's really important is if you have a team of 20 or if you have a team of 200 or more, there's a number of leadership styles that you're going to have to adapt to really inspire and motivate your team members. And we'll do our best to kind of talk through that. But there's really a couple of things that I want to talk about today that I don't know that we often look at from a leadership perspective. And that's, you know, leadership. We talk about, you know, leading the team to be successful, meeting and achieving goals. You know, in public safety, it's meeting the mission, it's doing all those good things that we should be doing, answering 911 calls. From a GIS perspective, right, it's supporting all those ancillary business units that are using the data that you are providing. But what I want to talk about is how do we empower those team members who were in those tasks, which a lot of folks see as mundane. How do we empower them to help us shape the future of our organization? Each of us have a different business model, you know, whether it's in private sector, in business we're in, it's certainly about growing and aspiring to do bigger and better things, help more people, provide more services, support folks along the way, become good mentors, and become good partners. But, you know, in the public safety side of things, it's advancing technologies, it's growing leaders, it's expanding your capability mission statement within public safety. And GIS certainly is evolving into all of those things as well, leveraging new technologies, doing more with data, you know, sharing more. So how do we inspire those team members to really shape that future? Because we should always be thinking down the road, you know, short term and long term. And the other component of that is, we talk a little bit about, is building confidence within our team members so that we can accelerate those leaders. And then they can then become leaders of their own and develop followers. You know, one thing that I think is important to remember when we're talking about leadership is about developing followers. When you can build a relationship with your team members and they will follow you wherever you go, regardless of complexity, regardless of risk, regardless of how scary it may be, you've done your job as a leader. Because you've shown that you have their back, in turn they will have your back and follow you where you want to go. The other thing I think we should talk about is why should you as a leader or aspiring leader really cultivate the idea of building and developing personal and professional relationship networks for your team members. We'll talk a little bit about that. Certainly we have our inner circles as we know it, whether that's the group in the office. Many of us who've been working remote for the past 18 months certainly understand how important our networks were to us and are to us, but really why we should strive to help them build that network. And then certainly accelerating your team's growth by leveraging their passion, their drive, and the energy that they bring to us, and how we can keep that moving without inadvertently shutting that down. And then certainly the last thing I think is critically important, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about this, is succession planning. It's something we talk about as new employees in an organization or in a company. We joined the company with some type of aspiration of climbing the proverbial ladder. And as leaders, it's our job to start that ladder the day they walk in the door, start figuring out how we can move them into a seat that allows them to leverage their strengths and their expertise to help us, again, shape the future of the organization, and then get them into a leadership role as we continue to advance, through that opportunity there. So as we kind of jump into all that, again, we talked about this. There's leadership, right? And really, what is leadership? And I want everybody on today's webinar to just think about that for 1 second. Think back in your mind, what does leadership mean to you? And really, what is representative of a good leader? When we look up leadership in the dictionary, there's really 3 different definitions of that. And one is a position as a leader of a group, an organization, etc. Or a time when a person holds a position of leadership. And then finally, the last one, the power of ability to lead other people. I think the one thing that's important there, and as you look to the right of the screen, you'll see that word cloud that talks about the things that come in to different leadership styles. But what I really think leadership, in my personal opinion, is it's that the power to lead others, right? When you've cultivated a relationship of trust, when you've cultivated a relationship that is filled with compassion and personal integrity and honor and influence, all those things that word cloud cultivate leadership in my mind. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but just because somebody is in a position of authority, whether they're a supervisor, a manager, a director, a vice president of an organization, whatever that is, does not necessarily mean that they carry the leadership qualities or traits to lead others to follow them where they want to go. When we look at leadership as a whole, there's a couple of folks I follow from a leadership perspective, and there on the right is General Colin Powell. Colin Powell is and was one of the most profound leaders that our U.S. military had an opportunity to learn from and follow. But again, from the idea of building followers, leadership is really the capacity to translate your vision into reality. So as a manager, as a supervisor, you have that responsibility of creating and cultivating the vision of where you want to take your organization. And as we said already, it has nothing to do with title. Leaders emerge at any level if they can motivate and develop followers to achieve that goal. And a short story about this from a personal perspective of why I really believe this is, in the first few days of position as 911 communications chief in Okaloosa County, Florida, I walked in, was introduced to my 4 communications supervisors that were leading our shifts. And the supervisors had the technical ability, the managerial ability to lead things. But what we found was there was one employee in particular on our team that really carried the stick. And when I say they carried the stick, they were the most influential employee we had in the department, because when he spoke, others listened. Whether that was good, bad, or indifferent, whether his vision or his feedback was in line with the vision that we had for the department, when he spoke, others listened and followed, regardless of what we needed to do, what we in our mind we wanted to do. So what we had 2 choices at that point from leadership perspective was, do we take that person and basically put our hand over his head and push him back in and say, look, you're not the boss here. You're not the leader of this organization. You're going to do what we say. Or we can figure out what his strengths were, and we can capitalize on that to then take the followers that he had and get them to see the vision that we wanted to translate to continue to move our organization forward. So we did that, and that was not met with arms wide open initially, because the tendency there was to push back on anything that the leadership team was moving forward and advancing as part of our vision. But it took some time, and what we did was we found out that his strengths were realistically in leadership, and he was a very good telecommunicator. So we found out what his passion was. We got him involved in that, and at the end of the day, he became one of our most influential folks in the organization, and really led us to a path of what some folks might refer to as organizational transfer and transformational leadership, that allowed us to go in from the ground level and change the way we do business. So what we did there is essentially we just empower him to help us carry our message. So as I said earlier, when we talked just after we saw the video from Jocko Willock, was and again, in your organization, you may have 20 people you're supervising, you may have 2, you may have 200 if you're in a larger organization. There's a number of different leadership styles that are out there. You are going to have to figure out which one fits best for you, but you also are going to need to understand that of those different variations of leadership style, somebody's going to need something different. You know, from a coaching perspective, you're going to have to understand and find that there are employees in your team who will simply be led led to carry out the vision of your organization if you can motivate them. So figuring out what exactly is their driver. Then you have the visionary, which is really the inspirational stuff. That's all your inspirational, motivational speeches. I relate a couple folks to visionaries, and that is, I think Jocko Willock is one. I think that Colin Powell is certainly one. And another one that I really think, and we'll hear from a little bit later, is Simon Sinek, is also inspirational. But visionary leaders typically are progress focused, right? So they have their mind made up on what they want to accomplish, and they want to see that accomplished through a very defined process. That becomes a challenge at some point, because when you let process intervene with the various styles of folks you're executing, sometimes that becomes a challenge to you. Servant leadership, you hear a lot of folks talk about servant leadership, and a lot of folks want to be a servant leader because they want to be humble in a position they're in. They want to protect those around them, let them see that everything is okay, and as long as you follow this pathway and you remain to your core, that you'll get where you want to go. And then certainly the autocratic perspective of that is they're very results-oriented, results-focused, right? They want to see things accomplished in a manner, and they want to see results turn from each of those benchmarks. And then if we look to the next style, there is our hands-off or laissez-faire type of leadership. They follow a similar path of the autocratic in that they want to see results, and they are very results-oriented. But they also delegate quite a bit. So if you have that leader, or if you're that type of leader, that you delegate things for folks to do on your behalf, that is good, because you certainly are empowering them. But what happens a lot of the times with those laissez-faire, hands-off leadership styles is we delegate a task or a project to somebody and let them kind of figure it out on their own without any coaching or guidance. So we have to be very, very careful with that hands-off leadership style. The democratic leader, I think, again, from my perspective, 2 sides of the coin in public safety, as a responder and then also as a telecommunicator. A lot of our folks there like to be led from a democratic perspective, because what they really want is they want say, right? They want to be able to come in and say, you know, I want to contribute to the policy, I want to contribute to the workflow, I want to be able to have some say in how we're going to do things here. Much like others, democratic sometimes goes a long way, but on the flip side of that, we can also then inadvertently allow the organization and the team members to really lead the vision and take us where we want to go, rather than us helping them get them through the vision that we want to carry out. Pace setters is one we don't hear too often of, but they want to be helpful. They want to come in. They want to roll their sleeves up. They want to get dirty with the folks, boots on the ground, doing their jobs. And along the way, they are motivational because they're pushing them along the way. When things get tough, they're coming right back in. They're saying, come on, we can do this. I can help you along the way. And then as we look at transformational leadership, I think in 2021 is really starting to catch on. I've had the opportunity, and I do have the opportunity currently today. My boss believes in transformational leadership. And what that really means is that those who report directly to my boss are challenged along the ways, but that on the other side of that, once we're challenged, we're also we are communicated to, and we are expected to be communicated back to our supervisor from that perspective. That's a little bit different. It's hard. It's a hard pill to swallow initially if you're not used to that style of leadership. That when you're constantly being challenged, and it's not you're being challenged because your leaders and your bosses don't think you can do it, but they're helping you through that thought process. They're instilling a sense of critical thinking that those of us who've worked, in different settings, whether that's, we were led by somebody who was a visionary or a servant leader, or that laissez-faire, hands-off style leadership, it's altogether different. So we'll talk a little bit about that later as well. And then transactional leadership is performance-based. This historically has been, I've been working since I was 14, and I've seen this style of leadership more than I think I've seen any other leadership, and that is that it's all performance-based. So those of us who spend time, and I'm sure many of you are working for government entities, you're looking at monthly, quarterly, annual performance reviews. There was a goal established for you to meet as an employee. You have to do X, Y, and Z. If you do that, you're subject to an additional merit raise, or that then puts you in line for a promotion, anything on those lines. That transactional leadership doesn't always fit everybody, because what it does is when we set those goals at the beginning of the year, or upon your hiring into an organization or company, before somebody really knows you, or before you know the person you hired, you're not really sure what those strengths and weaknesses are. So it's hard to set a goal against somebody when we're trying to figure out where they're going to thrive. One thing we say on our team all the time is there's a lot of seats on the bus. So we've got to figure out when we hire somebody to make sure that we keep them in the right seat. And that's not only the right seat for us, but that's also the right seat for the employee. What are they really, really good at? Where's their passion at? How can they help serve our customers better? And we find a way, best we can, of course, to put those folks in a position, a seat on the bus, to be successful in that perspective. And then finally is the bureaucratic leadership style, which those, again, if you've served in public safety, you've served in the military, you're relatively familiar with this. That bureaucratic style sees there's a hierarchy, there's a chain of command to be established, and that everything we do, we're doing for duty. So we have a duty to serve, we have a duty to provide, and that's where our focus seems to lie. And those leadership theories work. And they specifically work in public safety, law enforcement, as I said, military, because you have a job, and in most cases, that job that you have is your job to carry out as part of a larger team in a very high stress environment. See one chat. The screen is really blurry. Okay, Tina, let me see. I'm gonna knock down my video, and we'll see if that cleans it up. Tina, can you let me know if that makes it any better? I'm going to go ahead and advance my slide. Looks good. Great. All right. I'm going to keep my video off just as I'm sharing bandwidth with everybody, so I apologize for that. But thank you, and let me know if we start to lose any blurriness there, or getting any blurriness back. So the next thing I want to talk about is empowering your team members. Everybody has heard that they want to be empowered. They want to be part of the team. And what we're seeing here on the screen is I try to just do was sidestep. In order to empower your team, it has to be an unequal process between the team members you're trying to empower and you as a leader or as the manager. And what do I mean by that is, so I'm going to start on the left hand side there with the team. Is the team has to share responsibility. They have to be willing to share responsibility. They have to accept that additional responsibility. They have to be open to being empowered. Now that is difficult for some. I will openly and candidly admit that when my previous career, when I started working in a large entity in Western Pennsylvania, and like many of you, when I say this, some of you will probably shake your head and say, yeah, we're experiencing this, is everybody wants change, but not everybody wants to be part of that change. Everybody wants they want you to solve a problem, but they don't want you to bring a solution, right? So if your team member wants to help empower themselves to do good things and grow and become a leader in the organization, they have to be willing to share that responsibility with you. When you do that, you'll start to develop interdependence. So interdependence on you, interdependence on your team members, interdependence on external resources, which means because you've given them responsibility, you've allowed them to work through that responsibility, they've accepted that, they're less dependent on you to come back and say, what do I do next? I ran into a problem. What do I do next, right? Going back to the Jocko Willock video earlier, he talked about, I didn't get the job. I didn't get the promotion. We didn't get funding. Good. Don't let that trip you up, right? Find a way around it. You're less dependent on somebody else doing something for you. From also a team member perspective, we have to give them decision-making authority, right? I know that's scary for a lot of leaders when you're looking at somebody who's learning a position, but don't give them the ability to make a decision on say budget or full tilt policy or procedure, but give them some ability to make smaller decisions and let them work toward your common goal. So there's really 4 fundamental things there that as a team member they have to be willing to do: accept the responsibility, depend on themselves and depend on their others and less on their managers. They have to be willing to make decisions, and they have to work toward their common goal. Now, interesting enough, on the right hand side, we're empowering the team members, but that means there's much more work on you. So as a manager, if you're going to empower your team members, what you have to understand is that's not just delegating authority and delegating tasks. You have to be able to seek input from the employees along the way, get their feedback. You have got to do 2 things that are critically important to this. You have to ask for new ideas, and you have to then provide positive feedback along the way. Those 3 things alone will let your team members know that you care, that you're interested, and that you really do want to see them start advancing their careers. Now, the next one comes up and gets a little tricky is we want to overwhelm them at some point, because think what we're doing here. We're building leadership, and we're building leaders for our organization. At some point in time, you're going to have to make a decision, and that's going to be dependent on the employee, the team member, the tasks that they have. I think about when I was training new hire call takers and dispatchers, there was a point in time of their training where we let them fall. They had a low priority 911 call they were taking. Maybe it was a parking complaint. Maybe it was something low priority. We knew the address was wrong that they put in the CAD system. We didn't stop them. We let them put it through, and then we let them see the action from that. So overwhelm them when the time is appropriate so they can learn from that mistake. Now, the last 3, again, I talked about finding the right seat on the bus for them. I think I've talked about that enough. But these 3 here, fight for them, encourage them, and encourage risk. Those are critically important, because when you ask for their input and you give them the feedback and then you overwhelm them, you're going to have to go fight for them when somebody else says that's not the right person. You put the wrong person in charge of that. You give them a task they're not capable of doing. You've got to stand behind your decision and fight for them, coach them through that, help them overcome that, because you're going to build the confidence they need to come out of that on the other side and come back and want to do it again. Again, the other component to that is encourage them to take risk, right? The first time somebody steps into a leadership role, they're going to be overwhelmed. They're going to wonder whether or not it's the right seat for them, or if they can do it. So they're going to need to be encouraged, but again, encourage them to take that risk, put them outside of their comfort zone, challenge them. So really kind of what we're talking about here is empowering the team is that there's more work on you as a manager and as a leader to really empower your team and to support them through that empowerment than there is on the team member to carry it out. Certainly, we're going to have to stand by and support them along the way, but I think there's a lot of perception with leadership that the employee or the team member has to take the onus and run with it. Remember, they're not leaders, they're not managers, they're not supervisors, they're not directors, but they are certainly inspiring to do that. We have to help them get there. So, we can go out and hire the next person off the street, but what we're here to talk about today is building that team from within. And what I want us to recognize early on here is that starts with us, right? Us as leaders, we all should be aspiring to train our replacement. If you win the lottery tomorrow, if you decide to retire tomorrow, you want the organization set up to do better after you're gone than when you were there. And that is a direct reflection on your succession planning and your ability to empower the team. I'll talk quickly here about lessons learned because I just realized it's 1:35, so we got 25 minutes left. I want to have some time to talk at the end with everybody. But just some lessons learned for me that I want to share everybody, and that's along those lines is you have to create an autonomous atmosphere. Let those team members work on their own. They have strengths and they have weaknesses. We've got to find that. We can only do that if we give them some autonomy. Those of you that are working in whether it's a PSAP or you're supporting a JS team, if you're a manager, if you're a supervisor, and you have your own office, I say this literally and figuratively, keep your door open. Your door has got to be open. A team member should be able to walk down past your office and stop in and talk to you. Granted, you're going to just many times you're going to be on conference calls, you're going to be on webinars like this, right, where you're tied up. But if you're not committed to those things, let them come in. If the door's closed, they view that as they're not important enough for you to take time out of your day to talk to them. Along those lines, if you are in an environment where you have folks on different shifts, it's critically important for you to visit those different shifts at least once a quarter. Stop in on a weekend, stop in on a night term, come in early, whatever it is, stop and talk to them because they want that continuous feedback. Not only do they want the continuous feedback, but they want an opportunity to talk to you. You may not like what you have to hear, but that's what's going to make them feel better about bringing problems to you that need to be solved. We've all heard this 1,000 times. Own your mistakes, own their mistakes, and shift your success back to them. And praise their successes. There's one thing. There's two examples of this. When I was a young manager in the PSAP, our department made a critical error, which resulted in a pretty catastrophic event. And of course, the media and everybody was blaming on the dispatchers. And what was a pivotal moment for us as dispatchers and as leads and managers was when our communication manager stood before the public and said, "We did our job. We did our job. There was a failure that we could not control, but everybody in that room did their job." Prior to that, candidly, a lot of folks that are on a team were not fans of that manager, but it was, if those of you have ever seen the Colin commercial from many years ago in the late 80s and 90s, once we saw that press release and we saw that video, we were like, Colin, man, I want to run through a wall to do anything he wanted. So for the next 6 months, he could ask us to go rappel off the roof of the building, and we would have done it because he stood up for us and he backed us up. So again, own your mistakes. When things go good, you didn't do it. Your team members did it, right? So, and praise their successes. Make sure you give them the limelight. Confidence. We've talked about this, a little bit, but you've got to make yourself available. And before I jump into that, you're probably looking at the screen and saying, "Why is Elsa on the top of the screen And why do we have Tom Brady on the bottom of the screen? As a parent of 4 kids, the one thing I've learned is that issues are going to come up that are going to want you to challenge your confidence in being able to do something. And what I think of is the song from Frozen, Let It Go. And those of you who had kids are probably might be laughing and chuckling right now. But if you listen to the words of that song, right, it's you have to let it go, and then nothing can hold you back, right? There's a silver lining to that children's story that I think we can learn as leaders is don't hold on to things, let them go. And once you move beyond that, you'll learn from that. There's nothing that can stop you, and there's nothing that can hold you back from that. So you want to build the confidence. First thing to do when somebody makes a mistake, look beyond it. We talked about making yourself available, and taking responsibility and addressing their issues. This is incredibly important for us. As a leader, as a manager, I don't know if there's ever a time when somebody's walked into my office or called me up and had a meeting with me that said, Bob, this is bad. We don't agree with this. This is gonna cause some issues. And in most cases, we want to shut that down and say, nope, I'm the boss. I know exactly what we need to be doing. You just need to fall in line. We have to take personal responsibility for the decisions and the policies and the procedures and the leadership styles that we bring, hear their issues. And if it's remotely relevant, we've got to try to address that. When you do that, they'll come back to you with additional issues. When you do that, you've begun to empower them to affect change. And develop your people. So when we talk about developing your people, that you got to find them training, right? And we talked about it before. If you're going to empower your team, it's more work on the manager. If you're going to develop your team, it's more work on the manager or the supervisor. Find training for them. Find out what their strengths are. Find out what their weaknesses are. What are they afraid of? What are you afraid of? And again, let them fail. It's okay to let them fail. That's how we learn. And then encouraging peer mentors. If you have a mentorship program within your organization, that's great. My only caution to everybody, and we talk about this internally here, mentor programs are really good. I think they're probably better off being developed as coaching programs. If you think back to who was kind of your mentor, in most cases, your mentors were not assigned to you. It was somebody you gravitated towards naturally, and you learned from them in a certain way. So, but again, if it's a mentorship program, if it's a coaching program, starting to get one developed. There was a video to play with this. I'll share it with you guys afterwards. I think it's really good, and it talks about building confidence. But it's just in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and kind of move through that. This is something I want to talk a little bit about as well, and it's building the network. If you're going to build leaders from within, you have to help them build their network, because if you think about it as a leader, if you're a manager or you're a director or whatever it is in some type of leadership capacity of your team, your organization, if you look at your personal and professional networks, they're probably relatively robust, right? You're on LinkedIn, you're on Facebook, you're on Twitter, you're following folks, you're connecting with folks to learn from them. That is critically important to someone's success, because not only when you help them build that network, you learn about their interests. So now you get to know your team better. Along those lines, as public safety and GIS practitioners, this is one thing we do really good at, and that's network. But the one thing that a lot of us have a hard time with is reaching out, making a connection to a complete stranger, because they feel like, well, maybe am I kind of just creeping on this person, or why should I send a LinkedIn connection? Help them through that fear. So when they send a LinkedIn message, have them send a note with it, right? And just say, hey, I want to follow you. We have like positions. We have similar backgrounds. I'd like to just see what you're doing. You can see what I'm doing. And it starts to connect folks. A professional network is so critically important to folks' overall success for a couple things. It allows them to learn more about their self. It allows them to pick up basically free training when they start seeing from other folks. But it also increases your team's abilities, because again, they're bringing information back. Somebody might have seen an advertisement for some new technologies, and that's the next piece: identify industry changes. new technologies, someone on social media come in and they say, hey boss, did you see this? I saw this on LinkedIn the other day, or I saw this on so-and-so's Facebook page. This looks really cool. That network is what brought that knowledge base to them. So that is critically important. I think even more than maybe some internal mentorship and coaching is building the network to learn from others across the world. And then lastly, and folks aren't gonna some folks won't like to hear this, it's gonna promote advancement opportunities. Those advancement opportunities may not always be within, right? There's a lot of folks that build a personal brand around themselves. And as a result of that, they're recruited by other folks. That's good. Because if you can't give them an ability to grow in the organization and become a leader, because either you don't have a right seat, you don't have time, whatever that is, you've given them the ability to lead and attain their career aspirations. The bottom right there from Celia, the writer, if you look her up on Twitter, she talks a lot about motivational stuff as it relates to HR and career advancement. And what she says is building on existing contexts, identifying and cultivating new associations is a key to career growth. Again, it helps folks achieve their goals and their dreams if we can help them get there. Want to be mindful of time, again, 15 minutes, but we're going into succession planning, and then we'll have some time to kind of wrap things up. But we get into succession planning. I want to talk about, I want us to listen to this video from Simon Sinek. I'm not sure how many of you have had the opportunity to follow Simon Sinek. We use it here internally with the Data Mark team for new hires of understanding, kind of when we're talking to you, if we're going to bring you on and we're going to hire you, and then we get you on board. The first thing we want to do is figure out what your why is. So, but as a result of that, there's a lot of other videos that Simon does, and some of you may have heard the ideology here that he's going to speak, but I think it's important for us to listen to as we talk about succession planning.
There are two things that I think that great leaders need to have: empathy and perspective. And I think these things are very often forgotten. Leaders are so often so concerned about their status or their position in an organization, they actually forget their real job. And the real job of a leader is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in our charge. And I don't think people realize this, and I don't think people train for this. When we're junior, our only responsibility is to be good at our jobs. That's all we really have to do. And some people actually go get advanced educations so that they can be really good at their jobs, accountants or whatever, right? And you show up and you work hard, and the company will give us tons and tons of training how to do our jobs. They'll show us how to use the software. They'll send us away for a few days to get trained in whatever it is that we're doing for the company. And then they expect us to go be good at our jobs. And that's what we do. We work very hard. And if you're good at your job, they'll promote you. And at some point, you'll get promoted to a position where we're now responsible for the people who do the job we used to do, but nobody shows us how to do that. And that's why we get managers and not leaders. Because the reason our managers are micromanaging us is because they actually do know how to do the job better than us. That's what got them promoted. Really what we have to do is go through a transition. Some people make it quickly, some people make it slowly, and unfortunately some people will never make that transition at all. Which is we have to go through this transition of being responsible for the job and then turning into somebody who's now responsible for the people who are responsible for the job. And as I said before, one of the great things that is lacking in most of our companies is that they are not teaching us how to lead. And leadership is a skill like any other. It is a practicable, learnable skill. And it is something that you work on. It's like a muscle. If you practice it all the days, you will get good at it and you will become a strong leader. If you stop practicing, you will become a weak leader. Like parenting, everyone has the capacity to be a parent. Doesn't mean everybody wants to be a parent, and doesn't mean everybody should be a parent. Leadership is the same. We all have the capacity to be a leader. Doesn't mean everybody should be a leader, and it doesn't mean everybody wants to be a leader. And the reason is because it comes at great personal sacrifice. Remember, you're not in charge, you're responsible for those in your charge. That means things like when everything goes right, you have to give away all the credit. And when everything goes wrong, you have to take all the responsibility. That sucks, right? It's things like staying late to show somebody what to do. It's things like when something does actually break, when something goes wrong, instead of yelling and screaming and taking over, you say, try again. When the overwhelming pressures are not on them, the overwhelming pressures are on us. At the end of the day, great leaders are not responsible for the job. They're responsible for the people who are responsible for the job. They're not even responsible for the results. I love talking to CEOs and say, what's your priority? And they put their hands on their hips all proudly and say, my priority is my customer. I'm like, really? You haven't talked to a customer in 15 years. There's no CEO on the planet responsible for the customer. They're just not. They're responsible for the people who are responsible for the people who are responsible for the customer. There are two things that I think that great leaders need to have.
Oops, sorry about that. Simon Sinek summed up a lot of things there that we've kind of talked about already. But there's a couple of things that he said that I want to talk just a little bit about, and that is his analogy to asking a CEO the number one priority. And as a leader of an organization, we should have the same thought process there. Now, as a vendor working in the vendor community, right? 100%. Our customers, and if you've attended our webinars before, which I know most of you have, our priority is delivering the best service we can to support you, to be an advocate. That is true as an organization, and that we do that through taking care of our folks. Our CEO, I just had an opportunity to meet with our CEO a week and a half ago. Our CEO puts the team members first. They make sure they're supported, they have the right resources, they have the right training to do that. Why does he do that? He does that because if he does that for us, we can do that for our team members can do it for one another, and eventually who's set up for success there and who's treated the same way inadvertently through our vision, our model, is you, the customer, or the subscribers. So that is all relevant. And putting that in perspective. Now, with succession planning, I said this earlier, when you leave the organization because you hit the lottery, you retire, you take on another position somewhere else, it should be your aspiration that the team is better after you left than when you were there. And that's because what's that a result of is that's the folks that you've mentored, you've coached, that you led, that you've trained, have listened directly from you, and they've been able to step in those roles that previously maybe were filled. Now, what I like this cartoon on the slide. I actually added it this morning. when I was flying to Dallas because I saw it and I thought it's right. And it's, you hear managers and others say it one way or another, right? One day you're going to be here, one day, but right now I need you to go be here. And there's all these different analogies to that, is that we give employees and team members reasons why they can't do something to serve our need. So, for example, we post for a position, there's another position being hired as a manager. Yeah, I think you can get there, but right now I need you to be the GIS analyst. I need you to be the fire dispatcher because you're really, really good at it. And you do it better than anybody else. I need you to do this. I need you to do that, right? Well, your strengths are really here. Sometimes there's a time to have a conversation where you can say there just isn't a role for you. Maybe this isn't the right fit for you, right? Or I'm not retiring until 2022, so you're gonna have to hang tight because you're not taking my job. I need you to do this first before we get to that point. What I'm trying to get to here is a lot of those reasons that we give are coupled by fear. And they're coupled by fear that the person below us is gonna do well enough that somebody else sees it, and they empower them to be in a position to show their value to the organization and to the company and take over your job. That's okay. you've done, if that's the position, then you're in, that's good. You've built that. That's our direct correlation to your leadership. You've cultivated them. You've built that team from within. But to that point, if you're driving them to do better, they should be driving you. And equally, your superiors should be doing the same to you. Succession planning starts now. When you get hired with an organization, you should be being groomed to move up the ladder and take on additional positions. The CEOs, the directors, the managers, the county administrators, right? They should be grooming you to take their job. What's really important about succession planning is that you have to have buy-in from everybody. So in order to do that, you have to make it worthwhile, which means you have to give them the experience, you have to give them the exposure, and you have to educate them to be successful in what you want them to do, and what seat on the bus that is. You have to have accountability and advocacy, which means tell them who's responsible for it. You can, as you shift responsibility and you empower the team members by allowing them to work through challenges, tell them who's responsible for it, because they want to know. They want to know if this thing goes sideways, who's getting hung up on it. And it's okay to tell them that it's them, because they're going to dig in and make sure it gets accomplished. But as I just said, you have to have senior level support. So if you're building your team and you're building succession planning and you're trying to train them along the way and coach them to take over a position, hopefully your bosses are doing the same thing for you. You want to orient them to the future, which means you got to remove the fear that they're going to get better than you, and remove the fear that they're going to get in trouble or they're not going to be given a second opportunity if they fail. So, give them the ability to drive your vision and let them contribute to that. The other thing that's important is, because succession planning is a long-term activity, you have to maintain a long-term focus, but you have to instill and define short-term goals. It's going to be equally important for them to attain short-term goals, 1 month, 2 month, 6 month, because they need to have those wins. Because for every 3 or 4 goals they're going to have 3 or 4 failures. So you got to give them the wins when they can get them, and keep them motivated to move along the line so that you can achieve that long-term success of either growing the business, growing the organization, achieving new things, or eventually, again, attaining that leadership position, because they have, again, created followers around them to move where they want to go. Transparency is just what it is. Don't do anything in a silo. Just like we preach here, GIS data should never be in a silo. Neither should your leadership style, which means you got to communicate the process. You have to communicate the expectations, so that folks are successful. On the right-hand side, there are really 4 blocks or 4 pillars to succession planning that anybody can use. And really, it's really twofold. It's either process-centric or it's people-centric. My personal belief is it has to be people-centric. And you're going to have a variation of objective and subjective processes, which means put the people first. It can't be not life-threatening, but it might need to be tied back to some type of business-centric or behavioral evaluation of the employee, right? They have to have, like we are expected to, be able to kind of be bent and pried and twisted to meet the overall vision. There's a lot of training out there, folks. If you're on LinkedIn, and we can do this, we can probably do courses on this and take 4 or 5 hours. But if you're on LinkedIn, if you have a premium membership, go to the LinkedIn Learning Academy. There's a ton of stuff on succession planning. If you're looking to figure out ways to build leaders within your organization, you've got to find ways to develop and formalize a succession plan program. Because everything that it takes to build a succession plan program is going to require you to lead team members in various fashions of the operation. I would highly recommend premium membership. It's LinkedIn Learning is free, ton of training out there. Speak to your superiors, find a way to cultivate that type of plan, and get busy on it. I ran right up to the gate. It's 1:58 Central Time, but I'll take some time, and I want to thank you for spending time with us today. Talk a little bit about building those leaders from within. Again, this is critically important. It's kind of like the movie The Replacements. If you've seen, the movie from the 90s of Replacements, that's exactly what we should be doing with our team members, and that's building a team that has the aspiration and the confidence and the wherewithal to go in and stand in for the very best. When we leave, we want folks to take over that we train and that we build up. That's a direct reflection on you. My contact information is on the screen. I am not an expert in leadership by any means. I think there's a lot of other folks out there that have some great material, but I'm just thrilled to be able to spend the hour with you and share some of the things that I've learned along the way, things that have not worked for me, feedback I receive from employees. We have one-on-ones with our employees, so I get to hear candidly, and our team will tell you we're an open book. So if you're not happy about something, folks, tell us, because that makes us be better leaders. And let's see if there's any question. There's one question. Oh, we're gonna get a copy of this presentation. Absolutely. We'll work with. We will work with Stephanie to get the list and send it out to you guys. We would absolutely share this with you guys. I thank you for your time, and hope we get to see you on the next one. Thank you for stopping by and visiting with us. Thank you for work, and thank you for what you're doing for whoever it is that you're serving, whether that's public safety, GIS. We appreciate you, and we aspire to be just like the rest of you. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.